So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Before we start our presentation, I really have a very interesting question that I want to ask. Have you ever wondered how many air crashes are there every year? Any volunteer? 20, 30. Actually, the actual number might surprise you. Except for the well-known air crash, Malaysia Airlines and German Wings, there are actually more than 150 air crashes happen every year. Now tell you something more terrible. The maximum number of air crashes happen in the history is 562. Moreover, the maximum number of people died because of air crash in history is 3,329. What a terrible number, isn't it? So because of the magnitude of this issue, here comes our research topic. The impact of fatality and crisis management on firm performance at air crash. I'm Sean.
I'm Tiffany.
So I think everybody's here has experience taking the flight, right? And this topic actually relates to our life tightly. I assure you, after today's presentation, there's going to be a lot of information taken away. So here comes our presentation agenda. First of all, we're going to talk about the background and objective, followed by our research methodology and findings. Lastly, the limitation and conclusion will be given. Now let's move on to part one. An air crash might have detrimental effect over airline company. See the example of Malaysia Airlines. After the missing plane MH370 and the air crash MH17, Malaysia Airlines was delisted from the exchange and taken over by the government. However, given the importance of this issue, surprisingly, the relationship between fatality and the crisis management with the firm performance has never been covered by any of the scholars before. So we really think this is a very meaningful and important topic to investigate.
As for the objectives, it can be divided into two aspects. One is more fundamental and the other is more instructive. As for the fundamental objectives, we aim to investigate the impact of different scopes of accident and different approaches of handling the crisis on firm performance. And for the instructive objective, it can be further divided into two parts. For investors, they can actually use our study to help them to predict the stock price of airline companies after the crash. And airline companies can also use our study to help them handle the crisis and restore their image.
So in terms of our data, we collect the data of airline company facing air crash between the year 2000 to 2015 from a database called Aviation Safety Network. And because we want to study the firm performance, right? As a measurement of firm performance, we collect the data of we found out the listed company inside our samples, and we got their stock price from various tools, for instance, Bloomberg and Yahoo Finance.
As for the variables in the crisis management, the response time is defined as a time difference between the crisis and the first press release on the Factiva, which is a news collection platform. And the presence of top management functions as a dummy variable. If there is presence of CEO within 5 days, the number will be 1, and if not, the number will be 0. And we choose these two variables because we believe that the response time represents effectiveness of the company in handling the crisis, while the presence of top management shows the emphasis that the company places on crisis.
So in terms of our research methodology, in step one, actually, as the fatality has a major impact over the airline company, so we first of all investigate the relationship between fatality and firm performance. We use the stock price 1 day before and after each air crash to calculate the stock return. Further, we minus the corresponding market return to get the abnormal return of the airline company. Then we adopt linear regression model to with fatality being the x-axis and stock return being the y-axis. Now, the reason why we need to use a linear regression model is because we want everybody, even with a very fundamental logic about statistics, we have no problem in understanding our research. In step two, we further use qualitative analysis to study crisis management. Specifically, we will make a thorough comparison between the two well-known companies, Air France and Malaysia Airlines, to show you how different crisis handling approach might drive the abnormal return of the two different companies in totally opposite directions. In step 3, we further quantify the crisis management approach identified in previous step, and we put it on the as variables inside our multilinear regression model. We further interpret the result of the multilinear regression model and conduct an economic magnitude analysis to show you how important the crisis management is. So I think it's the high time that we move into the most exciting part of our presentation, right? Our key findings. I guess some of you cannot wait to see the pattern, right? So this is the pattern we got. With fatality being the independent variable and abnormal return being the dependent variable. We got a totally 47 sample, and 14 out of 47 actually got an abnormal return, higher positive abnormal return, even after air crash. With regard to the minimum abnormal return is negative 64% with a fatality of 239. The maximum abnormal return, however, is around 3% with a fatality of 1. So just by observation, we can see that when the fatality is relatively small, approximately less than 100, the pattern seems to be random. So the abnormal return is random, so no pattern could be derived. However, when fatality goes larger and larger, it seems that there's a negative correlation between the abnormal return and the fatality, right? However, you merely see from your eyes. How do you know whether you can trust your eyes or not? That's why we need a linear regression model. The R-square here of 0.34 shows actually the linear relationship is very, very significant. Moreover, you can see per the equation here, for one person died inside the air crash, there's going to be a 0.07% decrease of the abnormal return inside airline company. Now again, 0.07%. Oh, come on, it's not a big deal, right? However, if you take into consideration the fact that our average fatality number is 48 among our samples, you got a 3.36% decrease of abnormal return. And if you still don't believe it's a big deal, that's okay. Let's see Cathay Pacific. Right now, it has a market capitalization of 50 billion Hong Kong dollar. If in one day there's an air crash causing 48 people died in the air crash, it's going to be 1.68 billion Hong Kong dollar loss for the firm value. What a disaster, not only to the passengers, but also to the shareholders of the company.
So from Xiaohui's economic magnitude analysis, we can see that fatality really have a very significant influence on firm stock price performance. And now let's referring back to the previous graph again. And we can see that there are two companies that have the fatality, that have the fatality larger than 200, but with totally different impact on the abnormal return. And they are Air France and Malaysia Airlines. And we will then have an in-depth comparison between these two companies to show the crucial role that crisis management might play on firm performance in terms of the response time and the presence of top management. So let's talk about the response time first. 22 minutes after the aircraft disappeared, a series of automated messages were received from the airplane, indicating failures and errors. And after the technical operations center had confirmed they disappeared, the company immediately activated its crisis communication plan and activated a dark website for the purpose of providing information to the public. Also, the company issued 6 press releases on the same day of the crash. It would have been impossible for the company to react in such an efficient manner without a well-established crisis communication plan in advance.
In comparison, in terms of response time, Malaysia Airlines really let us down because the MH370 lost connection in around 1:20 a.m. However, Malaysia Airlines didn't give any response until 6 hours after the incidents. So also the delay of spreading the information might possibly cause the missing of the best rescue and research opportunity. Also the public might wonder that whether this company intentionally hide some truth, indirectly causing the drop of the stock price.
Secondly, let's talk about the presence of top management. Actually, the CEO of Air France acted as a spokesperson during the crisis, and he gave the first public statement on the same day of the crisis. And actually, he took significant actions concerning the two most important parties. On one hand, he spent time with families of the victims and expressed his sympathy. On the other hand, he actually met with journalists to provide update about the information.
And in this dimension, Malaysia Airlines didn't do well either because the CEO didn't come forward to address the public until 6 days after the incidents. Even Malaysia Airlines mainly used online press release to address the public. Moreover, when he held the conference, it was some officials of Malaysia Airlines rather than the CEO to come forward. The action taken by Malaysia Airlines show it's taking very limited responsibility, and it's never going to be sufficient to comfort the relatives of the passengers.
So from the previous case analysis, we can say that apart from fatality, the response time and the presence of top management also contribute a lot in the firm stock price. So we want to further quantify these two variables by including them into our regression model to conduct a multilinear regression so as to see their impact. And this is our regression output. And we can say that the R squared equal to 0.47, which indicates that there is a linear relationship existed. Apart from this, the significance F shows the probability that the function does not explain the variation in the dependent variable. In this case, the significance F is significantly lower than 0.05, which is the alpha level, thus confirming the validity of our regression output. Moreover, the lower the p-value, the more likely that the dependent and independent variable are related. In this case, the extremely low value of p-value of fatality confirms our hypothesis before that fatality has a very significant influence on firm stock performance, and the p-value of response time is also very low. And apart from this table, we can also get a quotient like that, and the response time in that equation is expressed in terms of 24 hours in a day. So to let you have a better understanding of the response time, we assume that the response time follows as a random variable follows normal distribution, and according to our data, we calculate a mean of 8.5 hours and a standard deviation of 6.2 hours. So the data from one standard deviation above and one standard deviation below the mean is 14.7 hours and 2.3 hours respectively. In our data, the company that has the closest response time to 14.7 hours is the SkyWest Corporation that have a market capitalization of 7.75 billion Hong Kong dollars. Now, however, imagine that if the company could have reacted earlier and had controlled its response time at around 2.3 hours, according to our formula before, the company can actually help its investors statistically to prevent losing from 458 million Hong Kong dollars, which is a very huge number. Again, the technical result is consistent with our analysis before. That is, the firm stock performance is mainly determined by the fatality, while the presence of top management and response time also contributes a lot. So now let's move on to the final part, the limitations and conclusions. As for the limitations, firstly, there is a potential problem due to the lack of samples. Although there are indeed hundreds of air crashes every year, however, many airline companies are unlisted, so it is relatively difficult for us to obtain the stock price for those companies. Secondly, we limit ourselves to secondary data, and actually we're aware that secondary data are incomplete by its nature and may be biased by the person who produced it. However, since we mainly focus on the external communication of airline companies, we believe that the problem created by this limitation will not be too big.
So to sum up, we utilize regression model to show your abnormal return indeed has a negative correlation with the fatality, negative correlation with the response time, and the positive correlation with the presence of top management. After figuring out the fatality has the most significant impact over abnormal return, we then focus on different practice in crisis management. Specifically, we propose a generic crisis management model to airline company. The success of crisis communication largely depends on the immediate response of the airline company in understanding the situation and in taking corresponding action to handle the crisis. Also, the training of the sportsperson and the leadership play a very significant role in crisis management. However, in order to grant more credibility in the conclusion raised here, we suggest that the researchers should think about more ways to compensate for the limitation that mentioned before, and especially find out more data in terms of how exactly airline company handle crisis, and to quantify them with the other theoretical model to cross-verify the correctness of our conclusion here. Thank you very much for coming, and we appreciate that if you acknowledge our effort and vote for us. Thank you.